This is the user interface to the Salto platform. What we have here are a couple of environments. Now, an environment is just our connection to your NetSuite instance, and everything that starts off with a fetch. These fetches can be scheduled weekly, daily, or hourly, whatever best fits your schedule. And what that does is we go out and we fetch the metadata only from your NetSuite environments. What we do with that data is we translate it into what we call a NACL file, which is both human readable and machine readable, and do some analysis on those files. First thing we do is we present them in an organized format over here on the left. We have your custom records, everything in your file cabinet, like your suite scripts, your standard records, settings, and any of the types. Now, when we start looking at those records, these are all of the things that you would expect to see. Everything from a saved search to entry form and transaction forms, as well as your workflows. When we start looking at the actual elements themselves, you can see that this is Salto's representation of the object that's in NetSuite. Everything is here in Salto that you would expect to see in NetSuite, all of the context, the initialization conditions, as well as the workflow states. But more importantly, what we do as part of the import process is we analyze the dependencies that occur between the elements within NetSuite. Here we can see that this workflow depends on a save search in a custom field. We have the ability to navigate to these underlying elements so that we can see exactly how deep the dependencies go. Here we're looking at the saved search representation here in Salto. If we wanted to see this in NetSuite, we provide you with an icon to get over to that. But again, the important part that we have are the dependencies down here. You can see that this is used by just the single workflow that we came from, but it depends on a couple of custom fields. As we look into one of these custom fields, we can see that this is used by significantly more things than the previous two elements. This is used by 6 save searches and 14 transaction forms. So if we're going to make any changes, we probably want to be very careful because of the impact that this will have. While this is very good for customers to be able to navigate and understand the impact, what it allows us to do is use that dependency as part of our deployment process. Here we go to the compare and deploy activities, and we're going to choose between our two environments. So we've got my sandbox that I was just looking at is going to be my source. I'm going to use my other sandbox as my target. Again, we don't care the source and target of the environments. You can move just as easily between sandbox and production as you can from production to sandbox. Today we're going to promote this workflow, so we're just giving it a meaningful description here, and then we do our compare and deploy. What this is going to do is compare the two trees that we were previously looking at and tell us what the differences are between the two environments. What this is telling us is that to make Sandbox 2 look like Sandbox 1, we have 475 total changes that need to occur. 245 of those would be additions, meaning they're in Sandbox 1 but not in Sandbox 2. 110 would be deletions, meaning they're in Sandbox 2 but not in Sandbox 1. And then 120 of them that are in both environments, but there's something different. When we're in a situation where we see something that's different, we have the ability to drill into that and take a look at what's different. We have our default view of the element, which shows everything and then highlights a little bit of what's going on. We can also choose from the changes, which de-emphasizes the stuff that is the same and highlights those items that are different. And for those that are more technically oriented or prefer a text representation, we can look at that in our NACL format, and we can see here that this this information exists in production, does not exist in Sandbox, so it will be removed from the should we choose to promote it. Today, however, we're going to be staying with that workflow that we were just looking at. So we're going to limit this to just seeing our workflows to begin with. And here it makes it easy to find our target workflow. You'll notice that when we select this, it identifies that we have two required dependencies. So if we go ahead and select on this line, we can see those dependencies here. As expected, we see that saved search and that custom field. We can go ahead and select that item from here to add that to our package. We also have the ability to add those dependencies from this missing dependencies field. If we go ahead and select this as well, we now have no more missing dependencies and 3 items selected for our package. The missing dependencies are those things that are technically required for the deployment to be successful. You'll also notice that we have other dependencies. These are the dependencies that reference something that's in this selected package, but are not necessary to technically make the deployment successful. However, there may be instances where you have business rules that make sense to add these dependencies to the package. For instance, it may not make sense to promote that custom field without promoting the transaction forms that it's associated with. That's not the case in my situation, so I'm just going to quickly review what it is that I've selected, and then I'm going to preview the deployment. As part of the preview deployment process, the first thing that we're going to do is put them in the correct order. We are going, since we know that the workflow depends on the save search, we're going to put that save search before the workflow in the deployment process. The other thing that we're going to do is look for known issues that could prevent successful deployment of this package. We're going through many checks and balances that we have experienced over the years, and that allows us to give you the benefit of our experience doing deployments. Once that process is finished, we can see that we have 3 items that will be deployed. All of those will be added, and none of them will not be deployed. Part of those checks and balances identify potential issues. We can see here that this saved search has a reference to an internal ID. So when we complete the deployment, we will have to go take a look on the target side and make sure that that is pointing to the correct location in that environment. Once we're satisfied with the deployment package and everything, and we're okay with all of the issues, we use this deploy and push button to start affecting change on the environment. The deploy portion moves the elements from the source system to the target system, and the push is an optional item if you have your Git repository connected to it. So at the end of the deployment, all of the successful items will be pushed to your Git repository. I'm going to choose to deploy this only so that I can show you the audit capabilities in a later step. I'm going to go ahead and deploy this now. And now we're physically going through and using the APIs and SDF to move those objects into my target sandbox. You'll notice that it gives us a updates as it makes progress going through there down here on the bottom. And once it's complete, it will present us with a status page of everything that's done. We can see here that we had all 3 items successfully deployed, and we're currently performing a synchronization event there. Additionally, we now have the ability to push this information to Git. You'll remember that I said that we have the ability to do this in a single step or as part of a individual process. So I'm going to do this as an individual process. When we push this over to Git, it highlights all of the items that we just brought in. It also gives us the message that we previously did, and also gives us a brief description of what happened, what the source and targets were, as well as who performed the activity. And that will push that over to our Git repository. Let's simply do that right now. And as that finishes, we'll notice that that will show up over here on our audit tab. You can see here the audit of promoting the workflow, and we provide a link over to our commit, in this case on GitHub. Additionally, we have the ability to keep track of files that were modified outside of Salto. So here we see 18 unpushed files. We will just preview this push, and we can see that we have several items that were modified, but that Salto was not part of that modification. Here we can just select all of those and say external modifications, and go ahead and push those over to our system. That allows us to have a complete record of all of the changes that have happened in our NetSuite environment, regardless of if they were made inside or outside of Salto. Additionally, we have the ability to monitor those changes that occur as the fetches are performed. What we can do here is create a new notification, and we'll call this check everything. And for this, we're going to choose on any change, but we can get as granular as we like as far as modifications, additions, or deletions. And we're going to do this on all elements. We could also choose to limit this to specific types, as well as individual instances of those types if we just wanted to monitor those things. If, in our case, any change happens on any of those NetSuite elements, I'm going to have it notify me via email or via Slack. We have the ability to connect to a Slack channel for that. And then as far as the email, it's just a matter of putting in your email address. And saving. Now, after any fetch, if there are any changes that happen in this environment, I will be notified with a PDF file that is emailed to me at that email address.